Good afternoon and blessings. Oh, it is so good to be back with you again. I thank God for this opportunity to continue to share knowledge. You know, for the scripture that said, Hosea 4 through 6 says, My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Well, we don't intend to let that happen, but if we allow that Governor DeSantis and his ilks to continue to mess with our history, we will perish. But of course, again, we are not going to let that happen because the experts that I always reference can design a curriculum that will satisfy our needs. Because for me, just reading the history or watching the history of our ancestors have never really set well with me. It hurts my soul. So I, you know, choose to rely on my long-held knowledge of what a system as heinous as our torturous sojourn from Africa entails. Just to imagine it all I need. So what I find myself doing now is looking for solutions, which I feel that all of these assaults on us are God's way of showing us examples of what slavery has done to us, physically and mentally, and the ways to correct the situation. The message I'm getting is that we need something other than just knowing our history. We need mandatory study, like from kindergarten onward. Number one, the mandatory teaching of African people prior to any interruption of our lives pre-slavery. Number two, the mandatory teaching of American history as it relates to the African who were brought over here and became property through the diaspora. Number three, establish learning centers, schools, colleges that are set up specifically for a new curriculum called or entitled Africanism, comprised of subjects like Egyptology, African anthropology, African religiosity, African languages, the linguistics, African enslavement, African discrimination, African racism, the effect of all these maladies. Now, number four, study diagnostic treatments. This is just a start, but right now, I want to thank Norm, this great brother, for the space he provides me to share this knowledge with you. And, of course, my crew, Lula Salvador, Sheila Brown Bird, Juanita McClure, and Octavia Shivers. Y'all know me. I'm Ruby Williams Shivers, the unapologetic amateur, still looking for experts. I'm going to explain that concept, amateur looking for experts, each time I'm with you because it is necessary that you fully understand where I'm coming from. We have a great show this afternoon, though. My co-host for the month is Professor Kamal Kenyatta. Let me just read the bio here I have. Visionary thought leader Kamal Kenyatta, a fearless authority on African American studies, helps audience expand their horizons, leaving them with newfound clarity. Kamal seamlessly weaves history, philosophy, psychology, and sociology into his teaching, providing fresh perspectives that challenge, empower, and inform. With over 25 years of teaching experience, he is known for his unwavering honesty and ability to communicate complex topics that transforms how his listeners see the world. He shares his knowledge currently with students at Lehigh University and Northampton Community College in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and he has taught at various institutions over the years. His thought-provoking speeches and mind-altering books, including Black Folks Here, Revisited, Secrets, Shame, and Liberation, co-authored with Janice Kenyatta, and The 7 Most Dangerous Pitfalls Threatening Your College Success, have favorably impacted the lives of countless people worldwide. In his latest literary contribution, the white people show how to understand racism and still be wrong about it. Kamau fearlessly dives into the intricate web of racism, challenging both black and white communities to re-evaluate their understanding of individual and systemic racism. Kamau Kenyatta believes in the transformative power of embracing a vision of victory and considers himself an active scholar. Now, for more information about Brother Kamau, you visit him on KenyattaSpeaks.com. He will be with me the whole month, and I'm so excited about it. We didn't bring a guest this week because we need to talk about some urgent matters that are happening right under our noses. No, really right in front of our faces. Governor DeSantis, the governor of my birth state, Florida, is running havoc on our history. Not only is he messing with it, but I hear that he and his minions are teaching that we, the Africans, benefited from slavery by way of developing skills to move us forward in the workplace. Well, from what I learned, we had skills when we were stolen from our homeland and hauled kicking and screaming over here. We were not slaves, you know. They brought the best. I suspect that may be the reason our history is being tampered with. You think? Which brings me full circle in declaring, again, we need experts. Here again, it seems that this is an opportunity for me to use this incident, as I did with the pandemic, to further define my point. Now, my dear deceased mother used to declare, God works in mysterious ways. I believe he has provided me another analogy by which to make my point. Now, as I always declare, as an amateur, I can defend our legacy, but we need those experts who not only can defend, but can define, study, and create solutions for what ails us. Lest DeSantis and his ilks can bamboozle and gaslight many of us. For instance, has created an African American curriculum by which our history has been bastardized. Two of the co-signers of this insanity are African Americans, a perfect example of how we have been mentally traumatized. That's not normal. These are highly educated people. Number one, Dr. William B. Allen, political scientist, former chair of the Commission on Civil Rights, professor emeritus of political science in Michigan State University. Now he's a member of the Florida African American History Standards Work Group. And the second one is the esteemed Francis Presley Rice, consultant on African American history, screenwriter, director, and executive producer with Block Star Music TV. You know, these are real heavyweights. Good people, I believe, who are products of syndromes. The Willie Lynch syndrome, the Stockholm syndrome, the abusive spouse syndrome, the imposter syndrome. I don't know, but I do know they are suffering. No fault of their own, but the result of 200 years of unspeakable cruelty we call slavery. Another 200 years of Jim Crowism and racism which produced this mindset. Let's be real. They probably, all of them, probably have children, loved ones that they would not want to lead astray, but they are suffering. But unlike this virus, have not been studied, which brings me to my first book. We must reject tired tractations and other nonsensical expressions that keep us damaged. You know, we criticize our people first because we don't understand what our experiences have left us with. I know you've heard the expressions, which I have in my book, quote, we are our worst enemies. But now you think about that. To meet that standard, who are you most afraid of? So I don't think we are our worst enemies. Another expression, black people don't stick together. Really? Who else sticks with us more? Number three, we're like crabs in the barrel. We are all in the barrel. Some are just further up than others, but when you get to the top of that barrel, you can be looking down the barrel of a gun same as the one at the bottom. There's another one we use, stop making excuses. We can't. Excuses is when white privilege is your foundation, and explanation is what we should use, is when slavery is your foundation. So stop it. We are all suffering from what I coined the African slave virus, 401. And for those of us who understand, can know some facts without knowing all of the nuances governing those facts, which brings me to how I explain, quote, expert in Africanism. Now, I think that's probably a word that we should use in terms of kind of consolidating those things what we need to know about us. Now, if I were creating a curriculum, my curriculum would look like this. 7 components. 1, study the history of Africans from the inception of their existence. Among other things, we'll learn that they are the original people. We are the original people. Number 2, study the maintenance of the African society throughout our history. And this model goes all of our deficiencies. Somebody mixed my paper up here. Let me just see. 16, 17, 18. 15, 16. Okay, let's see what we got. The evidence will show that Africans were highly skilled before their capture. They were the greatest scientists, greatest mathematicians, builders of the pyramid, etc. Now, number 3, study the interruption of the African society by interlopers, enslavers, and dehumanizers. Evidence will show that European scientists created false images of us as savages, subhuman, etc. Number 4, study the history of our enslavement throughout the diaspora. The physical rape, murder, hanging and beating, and mental brainwashing, mental illnesses, and psychological damages. Number 5 would be study the many ills and maladies, syndromes, as a result of that experience. The Willie Lynch syndrome, Stockholm, the abusive spouse, hate thyself syndrome, others. The ills, we have ills of high blood pressure, disproportionate to other folks, diabetes, cancer, death in childbirth, disproportionate in health, wealth, and education. See, number 6, diagnose each as a mean for treatment. Number 7, develop solutions. That would be the requirement of the experts that I often talk about. One such example, I read a great book, Dying While Black. I thought I brought it, but I didn't. By J.D. Vernella Randall. Her area of study is crises in the American healthcare system, specifically as it pertains to African Americans. She speaks of the damage and equity view of reparation. Damage alone is inadequate. Her proposal for developing a solution, she said, use reparation to repair, like health. Reparation does not mean money for damages, but reparation is an obligation to make the repair necessary to correct harms that arise from past wrongs. See, now that's the expert, one who has studied, number 1, diagnosed, created remedy, and applied the remedy to the situation. So, and this model goes for all of our deficiencies. As with the pandemic, it was studied, diagnosed, created remedies, and applied the solution. So when I speak of experts in this specific area, Africanism, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. So each time, you all know me, I'm going to have to define what I mean by experts. Many times I'm asked, well, who is the expert? Well, if we go through the list that I just outlined to you, I'm not just talking about any expert willy nilly, because there's a lot of experts in different areas, but not necessarily in the area that I'm referring to, and that's Africanism. Well, I'm excited about the show today. My Brother Kamal, welcome. I was talking earlier about DeSantis. What say you?
Well, Sister Ruby, I first like to thank you for inviting me to be part of your program here, which I think is one that's needed, overdue, actually, and necessary for the advancement of our people. Well, to talk about the Satans or the Satan, as some people call him, because he behaves and speaks like a devil.
Oh, yes.
Or being possessed by that spirit, as particularly as it regards regarding our people. Um, his attempt to undermine African people is flawed, shot through and through. He talks about the benefits that Black people derived from slavery by way of the skills that they supposedly acquired during slavery. And as you pointed out, we came with skills. In fact, they sought us out in particular because we had the necessary skills that they needed in order to build what they wanted to build. If you want to build a society or civilization, you don't go and find what they have characterized as jungle bunnies and so forth, people who have no intelligence and people who have not done what you're aspiring to do. They sought us out because they knew we could do it, but they had to force us, of course. And so we came with many skills, and it was our skills that effectively built the country and still maintains the country as little as it's talked about. But the part that he leaves out about post-slavery or post-enslavement is that, yeah, we had skills. We, in fact, were the most skilled people in the country. However, we were not permitted to use those skills because they put up roadblocks to prevent us from using skills. They knew that their
Except when
white
it benefited
population,
theirs, right? Except when it benefited them, they would allow us to use our skills to
our
build
skills
this
for them.
country. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. They knew that if put on a level playing field, blacks and white at that time, we would just run circles around them because we did have the skills and they didn't. So what did they do? They created unions. And in those unions, the one criteria to be a part of those unions was to be white. You couldn't be black and join any of those unions, no matter how skillful you were. And so this allowed white workers over time to develop those skills. And of course, for us, the skills begin to dwindle because of no use of those skills or very little use of those skills. And over time, we find that whites had the skills because they were allowed to come into the unions and to develop themselves. And by the time they come along and open up the unions, then they said to us, well, you don't have enough experience. You don't have enough knowledge. So you see the game that is played. That's what white supremacy That's how they play that game. And
Mm-hmm.
so the DeSantis has deliberately, whether he knows it or not, has left out that's just one piece of the debilitating damage that was done to us as opposed to the benefits of enslavement. And the other part that he doesn't talk about is how did whites benefit from slavery?
Mm-hmm.
So that
That's
discussion that he
obvious.
has is totally one-sided, and it's for the inept
Mm-hmm.
people who are
So who does he think
have
he's
moronic
fooling? You know, you look at a
intelligence.
person that came, and I understand that he was a professor of history, you know, before he
Yeah,
became governor. History of what, I don't know, but that was his title. Oh, who
it
does he
doesn't.
think
It,
he's
it
fooling?
really doesn't mean anything because even like you said, you have some of our own people who are on some of these boards and so forth, and for all practical purposes, they're useless and worthless. And
Mm-hmm.
even in other places of high positions, like Clarence Thomas on the Supreme
My
Court,
word.
coming behind in the footsteps of a giant like Thurgood
Thurgood
Marshall,
Marshall. Oh my goodness,
and
what
you
a
see how
shame.
useless Thomas has been for us. So you have people in education that in African American studies, allegedly African American studies, who do not know. And I'm reminded of our mentors, one of our mentors, and you know them very well, Brother Calvin Robinson.
Oh yes. Oh,
And I
great brother.
remember being very excited about something that I was working on at the time. I forget what it was. We were at the UNIA building in Philadelphia, and he and I were talking, and I was all excited. And he let me finish saying what I was saying. And he said, "That's good, brother." But he said, "You got to remember this." He said, "They're all brainwashed. All of
Mm-hmm.
our people, every single one." He
Mm-hmm.
said, "It doesn't matter what kind of degrees they have, how much money they have, how much status.
Exactly.
You have to remember." And as you point out in your books, the
Mm-hmm.
damage.
Yes.
It's not because somebody has a college degree that they're not damaged,
Mm-mm.
or because they've made a bunch of money, they're not damaged. They are just as damaged. They
Sometimes
just
even
happen to
more.
have that degree, they
Mm-hmm.
happen to have that money, and so forth. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, you'll find out that their damage has not been repaired.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the reasons that I stress the point that we need experts. And I mean experts who have studied the same as with this, use the analogy about the virus. You know, this pandemic came in and we was, and for those of us, you know, who believe one way or the other in it, I'm not debating uh, the virus at all. I'm just talking about what we saw when we saw it. This was something that came in and hit us all, killed over 2 million people, and we were not familiar, had never seen any of that in the annals of our lifetime. So when it came in, though, we knew immediately. We didn't go around looking for anyone. We didn't go around looking for the celebrities. We didn't go around looking for sports figures. We didn't go around looking for academicians. We didn't go around looking for scholars. We knew that was specific people for that specific thing, which was a virologist, I guess, or epidemiologist, whoever studied that. Well, with us, ours was 5 times worse than that virus. That was a 2 year period which consumed about 2 million people through death. Ours was a 200-year period who untold number of deaths and maims and whatever. So something
Mhm.
tells
Yes.
me, the amateur, that I need someone other than someone who just know history. That's good. There's a lot of people know history. I tell everyone all the time, I'm an expert in living black because I live black every day. It's a whole different thing when you are black living. Black living consists of all the things that we've done before, in between, after, and still doing. And we need
Mhm.
someone like the virologist that will get there and study that specifically. That's what they do all the time, study that phenomenon. And when you study that, then you can clearly say, and you, like the young lady with the book on, I just read about health. She studied to a point she created solution, you know, and that's what we're going to. And we have our experts out there now. They just won't allow those folks to for any voice. They may let a Clarence Thomas, or Kanye West or someone we don't even recognize ourselves. But they won't allow our experts to get in here and work and do the work we need to liberate ourselves. But it's
Right. Right.
yeah. So,
When we talk,
brother, I know
yeah.
you have written some books regarding certain things that I've written about in my book. Like, uh, I'm jumping a little bit now. We may not talk about it right now, but I want you to talk about
Mm,
your one of your books that I was telling my sister about. You wrote about the hair, and those are the syndrome that I speak about in terms of what we have to study. We have a hate thyself syndrome that
mhm,
when you
mhm,
see the doctor that I just talked about, he's part of that group, DeSantis group, that's creating
mhm.
that mess around our history that we benefited. So they're part of that little group.
Yeah.
It's no fault
Mhm.
of his own, and I'll say that again. It's from the conditioning, like you said, the brainwashing that have happened to us over the 200 years, plus the additional 200 years of racism and discrimination. So when we see someone like that, and it just bothers me to see that, but I do understand there's a history behind it. And until we get our experts to zero in on those histories, we will just be pointing our fingers at each other and talking about each other in ways that we can't even control ourselves. I just want to recognize some of
Mm.
my listeners. Robert Cabbage Stock, thanks for listening. Terry Benjamin, I love you, brother. Thanks for listening. My son Lloyd, I thank you. And Salam, I tell you, y'all just keep it up and share. Share so other folks can come in and listen also. Brother Kamal, we was talking about your book.
The hair book,
Yeah,
Black Folks Hair,
yes.
Secrets, Shame, and Liberation. Yes, we wrote that book. My ex-wife and I over 20, wow, it's almost 25 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time when we wrote it, inspired, of course, by brother Calvin Robinson and Redmond Battle, um, I can say that there has been some improvement over the
Definitely.
time.
I'll agree with you there.
We
There
kind
has.
of predicted at the time
Mm-hmm.
that more Black women in particular would begin to wear their hair natural
Mm-hmm.
for two reasons. One, because of the cultural awareness that they will get, and the health issues involved with um, the hair. But we
Mm-hmm.
talk about what happened historically, why we developed this hatred for our hair. In fact, our hair has been a joke. I know when I was growing up, it was a joke. When you talked about someone's hair, you had we had these negative things that we were saying. We would laugh about it. And so, in fact, when Brother Calvin and Brother Robinson brought it up in the class for the first time, we were laughing because we
Mm-hmm.
thought it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
But we were listening to what they were saying about our hair and how beautiful and how glorious it was. And it was the first time I had heard anybody speak so uh, high of our hair. And
Mm-hmm.
it impressed me. And it was like, yeah, why do we laugh at our hair and so forth?
Mm-hmm.
And so we are attempting to run away from who we are. It's one of the attempts
Mm-hmm.
due to the enslavement, the kidnapping and the enslavement of our people,
Yeah.
that our features, our physical features, this is the first place. This is why this is one of the first books that I wrote. We have to deal with that. If we
Mm-hmm.
can't deal with our own physical self and love it and approve it and celebrate it, it's going to be very difficult to do anything else
Well,
because
when
it
Jane,
almost contradicts everything that you
everything
do.
else.
Oh,
Well,
I
when
love myself, but I have my hair straight. And we
exactly.
tell our children, oh, you should love yourself, but you got your hair
Yeah.
straight.
Mm-hmm. And if we
Uh,
straighten
get,
our
get,
hair and allow and have them go out with our natural hair, then they're gonna wonder what the contradiction is of stock. Say now you are straightening your hair. That has always been a problem and a issue in our community. And I've always thought about that as a child coming up. How will these grown up wear straight hair and allow the children to keep their natural hair, which we called at that time nappy hair. So it
Mm-hmm.
was all a issue, and I was so glad when you wrote that book, because that had a lot to do with the changing of our own, the definition of ourselves. It was an important piece, and it still
Mm-hmm.
is an important, because that's where you got to start with first loving yourself. And if you can't love
Right.
yourself that God made, and you don't have to try to convince yourself it is the truth, you're beautiful
Yeah.
people. Most
Yeah.
people, if you read the history, thought we as African people were the more beautiful people in the world. They
They
loved our
still do.
black skin, still do. But because
Mm-hmm.
of the brainwashing, and no fault of our own, it's no fault of our own. We people, I argue now sometimes with my brother, and he says he's not brainwashed. And I say, oh my God. Everybody in this, like Brother Calvin said, everybody under the sounds of the American government been brainwashed to some degree. Now, some of us was lucky
Mm-hmm.
enough to sort of escape the certain degree of brainwashing, but we all,
Mm-hmm.
because people don't pay billions of dollars, don't beat you over the head, don't kill you, don't hang you, and you don't come away with some kind of a negative effect of it.
Yeah.
And
Very
so
much
when
so.
they told
Very much
you
so.
that the light skinned person was more beautiful than the dark skin, and of course the white person was more beautiful than any of them with the blonde hair,
Mm-hmm.
that will affect you some way. And then when you begin to uh, take your child, your little girl particularly, and send them out to school with natural hair, and you go busy to the beauty park straightening yours. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not to condemn now,
Mm-hmm.
it's just that that's what we need to talk about in honesty, to let us know what we got to correct. Not
Yeah.
to
It's
condemn.
one
As
of the
I said in
pieces.
my book, Verbal Healing, there are we must reject tired, trite, tasteless, and other nonsensical expressions. It means that
Mm-hmm.
all the negative things we say about each other, we got to believe that much of it comes from the brainwashing. So while I may outline that or recognize that is a problem, I always check to say it's not our fault. And that's not trying to make excuses, because like I
Right.
say,
Exactly.
excuse is not should be something we have in our vocabulary. Ours is
Mm-hmm.
explanation. Excuse is when you're born with white privilege. Explanation is when you're born out of slavery. That kind of stuff. So go on. I'm sorry I cut you off, but
Yeah.
with
No. No. This is perfect. It's perfect.
with the Supreme Court decisions, I told you we would be talking about that too. I think we kind of need to know what's going on. Uh, all these laws that we just assumed was ironclad and now being reversed.
Yes, I think that the sister who wrote the book, The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander, it
Hmm.
really signaled what was already happening, but it wasn't as visible and as known as it is now. It's just they've taken off the sheets and
Yeah, that's
just
yeah.
wild abandonment on this. But she takes her signal from um, Derek Bell, Faces at the Bottom of the Well. And I take my signal from both of them in my latest book. But Derek Bell says something that we don't want to hear or accept. And I see our people working and thinking that we're going to resolve racism and somehow, and that is our responsibility and so forth. He said that racism is permanent. You're
Mm-hmm.
never going to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you receive any kind of benefit in a racist white supremacy as black people is when they determine that what you're proposing will benefit them.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't benefit them, you can scream and march and protest as much as you want. But until they recognize that there is some kind of benefit in it for them, or there is some kind of detriment for them, because see, we give them no detriments, no
Mm-hmm.
detriments. If you do this, we're going to do that. We never say that. We
Mm-hmm.
say, no matter what you do to us, we will forgive you.
Mm-hmm.
And as Malcolm X said, that's not intelligent.
But that part of the syndromes, right? that
It's
I
part
talked
of the
about, part of
syndrome.
the
It's
syndrome.
part. It's part of
Mm-hmm.
the syndrome that we're experiencing. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then we see whether it's DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so forth. That is just a sham. You cannot make people love you
Mm-mm.
unless you have, as Frederick Douglass said, power only concedes to power.
Power.
You got to
Right.
come with equal power. If you have a gun and I don't, you got power. But
Mm-hmm.
if you have a gun and I have a gun, now we got to talk.
Mm-hmm.
We got to, there's a concession. And see, we're in a position, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
where we don't have the things that we need. And it's due to the damage, as you pointed out. I think I got a frog in my throat.
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
The damage that is due to the damage.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about solutions and what we should be going toward, the first step, the very basic elementary step for a people who have been enslaved for hundreds of years, ill treated, bad treated, lied upon, lied about. The first thing that you don't want to do is have the people who did that to you educate you.
They're not going to
We
educate you.
should run from their schools like it's a fire.
Exactly.
Because when we go in there and when you talk about experts, we've had experts that come along and have given us
Mm-hmm.
direction. Carter G. Woodson told us, hey, look,
Oh
the
yeah.
educational system is designed to destroy you,
Yeah.
to mess you up.
Yeah.
You gotta do your own thing.
Mm-hmm. But those
You know,
experts are not
uh,
allowed to be congregate in any manner that would help us. They'll just eliminate. One of the things we're going to be at, thank you, Jabbar, for calling in. That's my nephew. I'm just so pleased. And you'll just share, okay? Keep listening. Um, what we got to remember is that we're the minority in this part of the hemisphere. We're not the
yeah.
minority worldwide, but we're a minority here. So we got to figure out a way, and I think we're doing it, to get together, to concentrate in an area that would identify the experts, because together we can change this. Again, I'll make the reference to the virus or any other specialty, because ours is not just out there willy-nilly. We have a specialty, and I call it Africanism. You can call it what you want, but it's a combination of what has happened to us before we even got here, in coming through the
Mm,
Middle Passage, after having got here, brought up on those slave blocks, sold like
mm,
cattle, and then after that, experienced something that we've never experienced, or no one in the annals of history. Nowhere
uh,
you can read that anyone experienced the kind of condition that we experience. So we are unique in that way. And as I often reference to our friends, the Jewish people, they got a word that they don't even allow you to get near, and that's the Holocaust. We all know when we hear that word. But now, if you say slavery, there are those who will tell you straight out, well, there's been slavery before. We are even enslaved ourselves. They will use all these analogies to say, well, we are not the only one. But what we went through for 200 years in this country, unless I'm misreading something, somebody better
mm,
tell me something different. Because I don't see anywhere in the annals of history that anyone has gone through, any human being or animal for that matter, has gone through
yeah.
what we have gone through. So once we understand that, we're going to understand the necessity of getting our Carter D. Woodsons and the rest of our people who have gone the route I was telling you about. The sister who
Mm-hmm.
did the health book, she not only studied, she went to try to figure out a cure for our ills. And
Yeah.
reparation is one of them. Because if you think about reparation, and I'm just a little against giving cash money, but that's another study. But I'm talking about goods and services, free
Mm-hmm.
education, free housing, free food, free whatever. And then within a period of time, once we have gotten that, And maybe we will be able then to have goods and services that we can, again, as we did right out of slavery, we had the means to shop with each other, you know, do whatever we
Mhm.
did within our community. Our money didn't just run out of our community. So until
Right.
we get that back, I believe just giving us cash money, we're going to put it right back in somewhere where it's not going to benefit us. So I would say goods and services. But though that is one of the means of a cure for what ails us. So until we get sufficient financially, there's going to be no respect for even anyone listening to us.
Well, just as in terms of reparations, I believe that's the number one thing. That's the one
Yeah.
thing that we must be advocating for, and in line with what has happened with affirmative action, because they are right. Affirmative action doesn't work. It hasn't worked. So now we like, okay, we jumped that. We want reparations, full reparations,
Reparation.
and everything that comes with it in the documents from from the United Nations and so forth. And I think we should double down on that particular piece.
Oh, yes.
Now, how does it get done? People say, "Well, it can't be done." It's been done over and over
Over and over and
in
over
different
to
parts of the
different
world
people. Yeah.
for different people. Now, I am for the money
Hmm.
and the land, because if we just go back and say, "Y'all promised us 40 acres and a mule," you reneged on that. Give us 40 acres. Because 40 acres is not a small little bit of land to deal with. Now you're going to need some more modern equipment to deal with that, not a mule and so forth. But those things, and I would say half. We cannot go in a negotiation, and I learned this in doing sales. You don't go in and ask for what you want.
Hmm.
You ask for double and triple what you want.
Hmm.
And so we can't just say, well, we just want half. No, we want 3/4
And that's
of
why
what
I say
you.
free. If we would get free schooling, free
Mm.
education, free health care, free
Well, see,
everything.
the schooling, I would challenge that.
Hmm.
We don't want to go to their schools
No, no.
because if you give me the money and
Hmm.
the land and stuff, we can build our own schools and we can teach our own curriculum and we can teach our own children. Because if they give us free education, it's going to be the same thing over and over. We're going to get the same product that we've been getting
Hmm.
from white supremacy.
Right, but what I'm suggesting,
So,
we create our own education, as we did back
yeah,
in the day when Bethune-Cookman came out and created the college. So we have done it. It's not
exactly,
that we haven't had experience to do those things.
precisely.
So we've done more right out of slavery, and then we're doing, and it's not because of us, it's because they tore down whatever we built up. So, but I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
the proof is in the pudding that we can do what we need to do with what we need. And the reason
Yeah.
I'm saying free education, that's just not a single thing. I'm saying in addition to free education, free hospitalization, free. That way we won't need to worry about any of those things and then we can concentrate. But in addition to the free education, no, free land?
Mm-hmm.
No, don't leave that out. I'm saying we can
Free
get
what?
that, but free land, what you're
Uh,
suggesting, free
mm.
the 40 acres and a mule. No,
We're
all of
talking about
that.
thousands of acres,
Right.
hundreds of thousands of acres of land.
Right. So all of
Um,
that, not excluding anything, but all I'm saying is with that, there should be free education because we need education. We know we're getting it under them, but we need education,
mm,
not affirmative action. If we had reparation, we wouldn't even need affirmative action. Now,
well, that's my
I
point.
wouldn't
Yeah,
reject affirmative action. It's as with the white woman. I think they said she was the beneficiary of the
the primary
affirmative action.
beneficiary
Uh-huh.
of
She,
affirmative action and welfare.
Right. So I'm saying that wasn't that she needed it to liberate herself, but that was just an addition. So that's what we would be if we were in the
Mm.
position to have all the other things through our reparation. Then we got affirmative action. That would just be, you know, benefit to
Mhm.
us, same as it was to the white
Right.
woman. So I'm saying we need to have all the free stuff because we build this country. They wouldn't even be able to give us 40 acres and a mule and it would repay anything.
Yeah, the
That
work
wouldn't even
product.
satisfy what our ancestors did for 200 years. So I'm
Exactly.
suggesting that in addition to the acres and a mule or whatever they're going to give us, they give us the free education, the free housing, the free medicine, so we won't need to worry about any of that stuff that was taken away from us originally. Because we are
Right.
disproportionately behind in every group, financially, educationally, and otherwise.
Hmm.
Just so glad you're still listening in. Tavia, thanks for listening in. Jabbar, thank you, my nephew. And this is Tavia, my publicist. Yep. Just you all just share, okay? And I tell you, if you'll if you like for my audience, if you like the program and think we are doing a job and giving you information that you need, you can enjoy this program by listening to BKI1 Radio or seeing me in person on Facebook or YouTube. You can bless this program by sending a donation to Cash App $ Ruby Shivers, Zelle, Ruby Shivers 158 at gmail.com. But I appreciate you listening in and I ask you to share. Okay? I'm so sorry, brother Kamal. No, I
No,
interrupted you.
no problem. No problem.
Okay.
The thing that I think we have to also remember is that, okay, when we talk about the reparations and the land and so forth and so on, our people have to be somehow or another re-educated. And I don't really, I have an idea of how it should and could be done, but what we value now. I grew up in the South, as you did,
So did I.
I think, and
DeSantis, Florida.
people had land. We had land, and there was a value on the land, but somehow or another, the land in a lot of cases was not valued enough to really fight for the land. Many people left and went to the North and the Midwest and so forth to get away from some of the abuse that was going on in the South.
And much
But
of
at
the
the
land
same
was
time,
stolen from us.
yeah, and I was gonna say at the same time, some of that land was stolen, and they're still
Mm-hmm.
attempting to steal that land. I know that happened with my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, and but all of them. And I was talking with someone a couple of weeks ago about all of my uncles and my aunts. They own land. They own their own property,
Mm-hmm.
and their children, however, don't necessarily, or their grandchildren don't necessarily see the value of land because that goes back to education. What are we taught? We are not taught the significance of land. Without land, there is no life. It is the
Mm-hmm.
basis of everything, and everything that we have comes from land. Everything you look around you right now, everything comes from land.
Yeah,
Without it, can't do anything. And
exactly.
so that essential foundation. And see, after enslavement, they knew that that was important because that was what they put on the table. Hey, for people to survive, they got to have some land and they got to be able to tend to that land. That's what we will give to them. And of
Thanks.
course, they reneged on it.
Thanks for listening,
That's what
Ceiling
we need
Walker.
now because
Awala.
even education,
Mm-hmm.
the so called formal education, I should say, you can take that land and do some significant things with it. There's lumber, you can grow things on it, you can do a ton of things with that.
Oh,
But
sure.
we are now so mixed up in this Americanism
Mm-hmm.
that has captured just about everybody. A very, very superficial world that
Very
has been
superficial.
created where we don't understand the real value of what is valuable and what is
Mm-hmm.
not.
And you know that's not inherent because we did understand that in our African days. And that's why that's just a must. We got to have our history taught from infancy.
Kindergarten, yeah. Wait a minute.
kindergarten onward. Otherwise, we're going to be we're going to misunderstand all the nuances behind where we are, how we going to get there, who's going to bring us there. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And like with my just you're talking about land. I know my mom's on my mom's side. They had land when her dad passed, and didn't have wills at the time. And her land was taken from them with a cow. It was stolen from
Mm.
she and my aunts,
Mm.
two or three sisters. Went this
Uh-huh.
one guy went to one of the sisters, well, went to all of them and asked to get their land, and they said no, because that was down there. They said no, you don't sell your land when your ancestors go on to glory. You keep your
Uh-huh.
land. But he went to one of the sisters and told the sister that the other ones had agreed to sell the land, which they had not. So
Right.
then that sister signed the papers, and he came back to the other sisters with the same story. They signed the paper, and then he gave them all a cow apiece.
There's a divide and conquer
Mm-hmm.
strategy.
Yeah, that's what it
They was
is.
like, no, I'm not signing anything till actually my other sister is here.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
all get together and
Right.
we
Well, they
agree
didn't
on this
know. That was
before
just
I sign
ignorance on that
anything.
part. Yeah, that was
You
just
know,
their ignorance. They didn't know. They
right?
weren't aware.
I understand.
And
I
couldn't
understand
wouldn't
that.
think that the person would tell a lie like he did, but he
But
did.
that's where the education comes in.
Right.
From the foundation, that
Mm-hmm.
education,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to be taught about our enemy. They lie.
Yeah.
Not
They
only do
lie.
they lie,
Mm-hmm.
they steal, they cheat, and
Yeah.
they kill.
Mm-hmm.
We walk around as if everybody loves us,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't.
Yeah. Well, we'll
They
let
don't. It's
that's a
our best.
learning process too. We have to learn that. That's
Yeah,
part of the syndromes. See, we got to
yeah,
keep saying that so our people will know we are in the midst of syndromes and a lot of other maladies that keep us from being the people we were prior to slavery. And I
right.
use that word. I don't like it. It's another word,
It's
assistant. I can't
enslavement.
think of her name, called Ma'afa. Who's the sister that created that word,
Sister
Ma'afa?
Marimba Ani.
Money, yeah, and it means genocide, which is closer to what describes us than anything else. So we
Yes,
got to
Ma'afa, yes.
once we
Yes,
got to do
indeed.
some elimination of those words that have been put to us by other folk,
Hmm.
to minimize, the
Yeah,
water down the
the
degree
language
to
that
what
we
they say.
use, the language that we use is very, very important in
Very.
terms of. Dr. Malefi Asante talked about it, and many others have talked about it. The first thing you got to do is get control of the language.
Oh yes.
You got to get control of the language. You cannot expect to rise to great heights going around calling each other the N word
Right.
and
Exactly.
using the N word in all kinds of references and so forth. It will never happen. As long as we are using that toward each other, we will stay in the same place
Mm-hmm.
that we are. It's just like Malcolm X said. As long as you walk around thinking you're one of the Browns or the Smiths or the Johnsons, he said you'll be in the same 1,000 years from now, you'll be in the same
Mm-hmm.
situation. And see, that's part of that coming back to ourselves
Yeah.
and not being afraid to, because we owe them nothing. We do not owe these people these names because
Mm-hmm.
my grandfather and my so had that name. Where did they get the name from?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
wasn't their name when they came here.
That was a discussion we were kind of
Self-define
having
yourself.
recently.
I am who
So
I
I
am.
understand what you're talking about. Yeah, I
You
understand.
know.
But another thing too, whenever we make those references, thanks Paul for listening in. Be sure to share, Paul Green. Um, we all have to, and I know I do this all the time, but I do it purposely because I'm the one that said we need experts. And when I say we need expert, we need those folks that will look at what we just outlined, know that there's a reason, and know that there's a season, know that we need to do something about it. Because just I look at it, I tell anybody, I say I can defend. The amateur in me can defend, but I need the expert that will not only defend but define what we're looking at, define why we're doing what we're doing, define how we can relieve ourselves of those syndromes and whatever else. I can't do it, so we're gonna have to have folks who can come together as a group, the same as those. epidemiologists. I keep using them because that's the reference I'm using with the virus. Those folks
Mhm.
who came together. I went to my primary doctor when this thing came out, at the beginning, and
Yeah.
was asking him some questions about it. But he made it clear to me I'm not the expert. So that
Mhm.
said a lot because he was an expert in what he was an expert. But he knew what I meant in terms of this virus. So we are experts in a lot of areas. But in terms of Africanism, again, I use that phrase, Africanism, we need people who will not only learn about it, but give us solutions because they have studied, they have diagnosed, they have studied. You know, when I got my vaccine for this virus, I felt a lot better, because I know I didn't know anything. And
Mhm.
I thought that the person who was suggesting it may know more than me. So I accepted that and I got it. And so our experts may not know everything, obviously not, but they will know enough to get us to another level that we can at least understand we do have something that has happened to us over 200 years that no one else in the annals of history has. And if you can go from there, you will be safe to say that we will come up with a solution one of these good old days.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, the work is cut out for us. What we simply, when you talk about getting the experts together, um, I don't think we cannot just get people together because they got a bunch of knowledge. Because if they have a bunch of knowledge without having come back to themselves as an African person, they will undermine
Well, then they
whatever
won't
the
be the
rest of
one
the
with the
group
expert. See, they're
sets out
not
to
the
do.
expert. They see. I want to be clear about that. They are not
Mm-hmm.
the expert that I'm talking about. The ones that
Mm-hmm.
are the expert that I'm referring to will have come full circle to what you and I just talked about. What we need, how we need it,
Mm-hmm.
to understand what went on with us. No, I'm not just talking to anyone. And that's making it very clear because they can have all degrees. And with Clarence Thomas, I think he has a degree in a Harvard degree, you know?
Yeah,
And
he
so
said, oh, I think Yale. I think he might have went to Yale.
Yale or wherever. That
But yeah,
so that does not make him an expert in what I'm. He may be an expert in whatever he's doing, the Supreme Court. I doubt that too, but hey, just for
yeah,
argument's sake. But
yeah.
that still does not make him, because we're going to have that if we think of it in terms of the virus or any other specialty. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
have someone who can seriously come up with some, having studied it in a serious way,
Mm-hmm.
having diagnosed, having applied, having done what it is to have helped us cure ourselves of all these abnormalities that we are suffering from. And no
Yeah.
doubt about it, we have to have been affected. My my fifth book was supposed to be damaged goods made in America.
Mm-hmm.
Because the bottom line, we are damaged. If we were not damaged, we wouldn't have those two professors down there in Florida assisting DeSantis in creating an image of that historically wrong. We wouldn't have
Yeah.
that. So there are other ones. We wouldn't have the Clarence Thomases of the world if
Right.
we weren't damaged. So we're going to have to admit, first of all, that we need somebody, and we can't do it singularly. We got to do
Mm-hmm.
it in concert with other experts, the same as you don't find one epidemiologist out there. You don't find one virologist out there. You find a group of
Right.
them. They may disagree with each other on different levels, but they are expert in that field, so they study from that position. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
say, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is absolutely that's absolutely correct. And in terms of solutions, as far as I understand it, and I've maintained this for years because I taught at the college level, and what
Mm-hmm.
I basically do is try to undo what 12, 14 years of schooling has done by the time they get to me in a 16-week time span. So that's a very, very difficult job to
Oh,
do.
yes. It's,
That's why you
it's,
have to start younger.
yes.
We
Mm-hmm.
have to have a plan. is number one. We have to have a plan of how we are going to get the minds of our youth back under our umbrella from an early age and train them all the way through. And we don't necessarily want them to go to Harvard, because I know everybody, hey, well, my child went to Harvard and to Yale. I went to Princeton, and I know what happens there. You get further lost in that situation. They usually come back to us useless.
Yeah.
And they usually go to work for some big corporation. They drain our brains and so forth. They don't come back to our communities. The Japanese give us a good example of it when they were totally obliterated, because what we're talking about is not something that has not been done. We got examples. They were obliterated when this country dropped the nuclear bombs on them. And in less than 40 years, they were third strongest
Brother
economic
Kamal, you see how effective you are. I'm so glad to have you on as my co-host. We just running out of time.
Out of time, okay.
But we'll pick this up next week. Now, you know the brother that's coming on, Califani. Oh, I can't even.
Yeah, Califani from
Essex County College. He's the director, so we're gonna look forward to that, brother, because he's gonna have some stuff to talk about. And you're gonna join me again, and I'm so glad to have you on today. Oh my goodness! And for you out there who's listening, I so appreciate it so much. You'll continue to listen and share. Okay, we're going to say bye-bye.
So we're finished. You're off. There's no open mic somewhere.
Now, one of these days you're gonna come in, my brother. You're gonna come into the studio. I said, one of these days you're gonna come into.
Well, you're breaking up. I'm not getting it clear.